Okay, for this first part, how history is faked or manufactured, I want to explain the way I see media consumption and the points of view that people have that determine how they process what they're getting through the screen. So, first of all, there are two primary modes of consuming media, active and passive. Active refers to the skeptical approach, where one is not automatically believing what they're seeing, but are instead evaluating it based upon the available facts. Now, when mainstream news consumers are looking at conspiracy theories, they're generally not skeptical. And by skeptical, it means that you get more information about it and then you make your judgment. They're actually prejudiced against it, so they're actually credulous. And what typifies passive news consumption is they're credulous, as in they're just willing to automatically accept something. So if it's mainstream, it's automatically true. If it's conspiracy, it's automatically false. So incredulity is not the same as skepticism. And that's a very important point, because when one is incredulous or credulous, they're automatically accepting or rejecting, whereas skepticism means I don't know yet. Need more info. So again, the passive news consumption is in every way non-skeptical, low information belief, low information disbelief of the opposing side. And this works both ways. Conspiracy theorists automatically believe their conspiracies while they automatically reject the mainstream. That's not the result of skepticism. It's credulity for their own side, incredulity for the other side. You don't see the informed disbeliever, the informed non-believer on any of these issues. And that's the position that we take here at the Infinite Plane Society think tank, that to disbelieve something means that you have some information that contradicts what has been presented, or not enough information was presented in the first place. So the skeptical mode of approaching media is active. Active as in there's some processing that goes into everything, as opposed to just the automatic. Now, secondary to this is the concept of the world stage. So the world stage is the closed system of information that comes through the screen. So in other words, whatever's not censored or ignored, whatever's acceptable, is included in what I call mainstream mediation. So this is the big tent containing the ideas that everyone agrees upon, even if they disagree on the cause. So for example, everyone here in the mainstream mediation lives in a world where a bunch of people died on 9/11. Now, the mainstream thinks Islam did it. The conspiracy theorists still believe it happened, but they think that it was done by somebody else or instigated by another group. So they add on to the basic story. We would call this MSM plus. So it's a subset of the mainstream, and it doesn't exit the closed system of the world stage. So the world stage is a construct, the internalized consensus version of the world, including whatever is presented by media. So in other words, the real world plus the stuff that we internalize that we can't possibly independently verify. So we live in a fusion of direct and then secondhand experience. The issue here is that the secondhand experience the broadcast media gives us often includes things that didn't actually happen. So fake gets fused in the minds of the news consumers on a regular basis. Conspiracy theorists are correct in noticing discrepancies, fakery, holes in the stories, but they're incorrect by thinking you can fill in the holes with theories, which are often planted there by people working in alternative media. The correct way to approach this as a skeptic is to say, wait a minute, I don't find any of this trustworthy. I'm going to get more facts, not falling into supplying your own facts, bringing your own additional theories. So what I present here isn't conspiracy theory. It's actually a very subtractive, nearly agnostic view of media, in the sense that if there's not enough information to support the belief in something, I'm not going to believe it. But it's not low information incredulity, but it's informed and skeptical. So the informed disbelief weighs more than low information belief. And the pausing before believing something, that suspension of judgment, is the main characteristic of skepticism. If you're automatically believing headlines, you're not a skeptic. And so the perspective that we take here is outside the boundary of the mainstream, because it doesn't take the mainstream view for granted as real. And it certainly doesn't go along with the conspiracy theories that just supply a bunch of narratives to try to make the story fit. A good case in point here is the Charlie Kirk event. In the mainstream world of ideas, Charlie Kirk is dead. The conspiracy theorists agree that he's dead. However, they think it was a second shooter. They think it was an exploding mic. It was Erica Kirk. It was Netanyahu. They have all these theories to explain who killed him. The off-world stage perspective asks, did he even die? And the reason we ask that question is that our appraisal of news events is inclusive of media fakery, special effects, the hoax indicators, those things that would indicate what you're looking at isn't actually real, and also what I call systemic fakery. Every news cycle, every event goes into the past and it becomes cemented as our history. So the fake events, the simulated events, merging with the news cycle, in fact, become part of the world stage construct. So to be a world stager, to have the perspective, the point of view of a world stager, is to have a frame of reference that includes the assumption, the presuppositions that everything leading up to today was essentially real. So that's a lot of propaganda, atrocity propaganda, staged events, fake people populating these fake events that are just tacitly assumed to be true. So there's no objectivity on the world stage. It's actually a hyper-reality, a merging of real and fake. So there's the point of view question here. If your point of view is world stage, you will never have the right answers. You'll go with the mainstream, or you'll have a bunch of conspiracy slop, but you'll never get to the truth. So the point of view, the world stage point of view, whether it's mainstream or in a subset, is inclusive of fake history. Now, the fake history I'm referring to is really what we can document and directly observe. I'm not talking about ancient history. I'm talking about, what to say, 1960 to 2026. You have many decades of consistent application of fake events influencing the news cycles. Fake news becomes fake history. And that's kind of the basic premise here. Fake news events, simulated events, are not PR stunts. They're not mere psyops or hoaxes that just influence a news cycle. No, these are permanent fixtures of the consensus worldview, and that's why they matter. So the point of view that they have, mainstream and alternative, includes this. The point of view that we present, the off-world stage perspective, is inclusive of what I mentioned before. Fakery, special effects, hoaxes, systemic fakery, not to mention an awareness of the relationship between mass entertainment and news, specifically fake news events. And how we often talk about the predictive programming, which has never been adequately understood or explained by the conspiracy theorist crowd, and it's always been dismissed by the mainstreamers as mere coincidence. But what we're showing here are indicators of systemic fakery, of influence operations, of propaganda in entertainment designed to steer us to accept these fake events that are planned oftentimes, in my view, years in advance, if not decades. And the fact that the fake events are planned so far in advance has significant ramifications that should be separately evaluated, and we'll go into that in a separate video. But for now, the main point is there's only two ways of consuming media: active and passive, skeptical and credulous or incredulous. And these perspectives interpret how, or give you an interpretive framework for everything you consume on news. And if your perspective is mainstream or alternative, you're in the controlled paradigm. You're in the internalized Truman Show. So there's two timelines. There's the real one that we all live on and experience, past, present, future. Again, past fake news becomes history. The future is already written with a series of fake events that possibly decades into the future, there's no way I can tell you, but what I can say is that the fake events are coming from a plan. They're scheduled in advance. So we have this secondary timeline of fake events that merge in the present. The merging of the two, the confusion of real and fake, happens in the mind of the news consumers. And then in the past, these two are fused. So our past is the product of real plus fake. And the automatic belief of the passive news consumers, it was what makes this possible. And that's why I think conspiracy theories are all controlled opposition positions. All conspiracy theories are designed to keep you in their paradigm, not to question the essential picture that it paints, which always reinforce what came before with, again, the built-in presupposition that what came before was real. So by separating the two, the program from reality, we are able to not only step outside of the program and not be automatically reacting to it or treating it as real, but the deprogramming process, stepping outside of that, gives one an objective perspective on incoming events. So we're separate from the mainstream and alternative boxes where they're reacting in predictable ways. Additionally, and this goes into the structure of the world stage, every major fake event is designed to have a bifurcation, a split interpretation, depending on whether you're left or right, what side of the political horseshoe, and this is a consistent facet, and that's because the two sides are deliberately polarized because they are being triangulated. And triangulation by the media is the tactic that's built into the system to maintain these constant dialectics. So there's no reconciliation, no unification. It's not even possible. And this bifurcation with every psyop is another hoax indicator because reality doesn't divide people so perfectly. So this is a consistent strategy that we see with every event that's inserted into the program. So why do they do this? Well, the reason why is that if they didn't insert events that triggered people and caused reactions, it wouldn't move us. It wouldn't steer us. So we're being cattle prodded down predictable paths. And the end result is there is a worldview monopoly. There is essentially a one world paradigm or religion that has supplanted everything that came before. And as such, what we're looking at here is a media monopoly, something of a religion. I call it a new monotheism. But we're looking at how the elite, how a small group are able to manage billions of minds by getting them all to internalize a Truman Show. And my best assessment here is that this is, in their view, the best way to govern. I think there might be some deeper implications, and maybe it's worth understanding it and stepping outside of the program. If you're going with the program lockstep and you don't see it, you're an NPC. And that's a choice people have. The problem here is that truthers, ironically, are deeper in the program. They're given additional layers. So you got the blue pill dream world and the red pill nightmare scenarios. The off-world stage perspective does not have a platform in what is effectively a duopoly. Mainstream and alternative are both part of the establishment. And every single conspiracy out there, and I mean every popular conspiracy theory out there, is just noise, truth-ertainment, distraction, and distraction from what? Well, distraction from the fact that you've internalized a simulation that can be manipulated. I'll close this with a quote from Frank Herbert from Dune Messiah. He says, "They are not mad, they are trained to believe, because belief can be manipulated and knowledge is dangerous." And what we're talking about here is this distinction between belief and knowledge. On the world stage, only belief is possible because there's no direct fact checking or reality testing of the claims. And the off-world stage perspective is knowledge-based. And if there's not enough information to know something, we refer to ourselves as informed disbelievers on that particular topic. So this is what you could call media Gnosticism, emphasizing knowledge over belief, knowledge as a superior approach, as opposed to just being a passive recipient of propaganda and therefore turned into something of a puppet. Anyway, this is part one of how history is faked and manufactured. In the follow-up videos, I'll get deeper into the rationale behind it and the actual architecture of the world stage. And this sequence of fake events scheduled into the future that merges with the real, that fusion that I talked about, this confusion, I call this program the metascript. And the metascript is the program of fake events that are planned far in advance that, if you look back, they're consistent and they're in their own timeline. So these are not anomalous events. They're not disconnected, but it's actually built into what media and government are. It is, in fact, systemic fakery. And systemic fakery has been built into media as far back as far as I can tell, and it's probably further back, the Kennedy assassination and even years before that. And our basis for saying so is our analysis of fake events, the hoax indicators, common denominators with each one, the presence of concurrent predictive programming, as we'll get into in future videos. Anyway, thank you for subscribing. This is just part one of how history is manufactured.